back to French versus Venetians here with Louis XII coming in and a mercenary Venetian army opposing him with some ditch work there. I'm going to have to take a look at the terrain, which will be in the booklet now. There's not room on the map for this one. Anything exciting here? Well, first of all, the French outnumber the Venetians, but there is a large Venetian force kicking around somewhere else. Now, it doesn't look like the French outnumber them, and the reason for that is get this big pile of French reinforcements coming. What we don't have is the other half of the Venetian army showing up. That's an option. Probably to even it up a little bit. And let's see, what do we have for any special? Well, let's take a look at the forces we have. Let's try to remember the Swiss this time. The French have Swiss running here. What the hell's the roll on them? I'll look it up. It's kind of hard for me. Now, one of the things with this is that the setup for this one is incorrect. The numbers on here do not match the locations on the map. They're close, but there are a few errors. One of the errors is, see, this is a continuous line here. The numbers in there do not create a continuous line. There's a hole there, a little bit of a problem. This force here is in the wrong place, is actually aligned, I think, with these hexes or something, and that wouldn't even work. That's one of the problems, but there are other potential problems, which you have like under here. No. Somewhere I thought there were artillery with the wrong force, but that doesn't appear to be the case. They can actually get in there. But you got to be kind of careful because in some cases you have to put artillery in certain hexes. Well, you have the option of putting artillery in certain hexes that are part of one setup, and that same hex is part of the other setup. So then you have the option to put the artillery here, for example, or you could push it further over. Anyway, what are our forces like? Like I was saying, I've got some Swiss pike without any firepower here. A bunch of the shield and bucklers armed with arquebuses. Mixed cav here, some light cav archers, some mounted men-at-arms, some useless light cav. Over here, a big pile of Gascon crossbowmen, and another set of French knights there. I think there's an Italian knight in there as well. For the Venetians, here along the line, arquebus armed, shield and buckler units. There's some artillery under there. I kept the French artillery limbered because if you look at the combat chart, anything greater than range 2, the artillery is kind of at a penalty. I can shift forward one hex with the artillery and fire and get some advantages. I probably don't want to charge right up with it. This isn't Napoleonic artillery. It would kind of disturb me. I think you actually can legally, but it would undergo, fire, which wouldn't be good because the artillery gets wiped out. And I believe it comes with an effect on the flight levels in this one, unlike Blood and Roses, where the artillery is just kind of garbage that you can lose or not. And let's see if there's anything else exciting here. So I got like a light cav on the line here. Wasn't much to do with that. A couple of heavy cav here, some cav here, and a reserve of shield and buckler arquebus armed forces here. Our overall commanders, he doesn't have a great range, but he does provide a -2 bonus to his subordinate. And Louis, also not a tremendous range. In fact, he's out of range for this, and I think that's as far as he can go. I think he has to set up with this cav force. But if he gets him into range, he gets a slight advantage there. Leadership values, these are +2s in combat, +1, +2. That can be helpful. So, all right. So the French are going to be the first player. We should take a look at the terrain in this one because it's kind of marshy right now. So I guess the numbers are a little higher than you might expect. I don't know, like, I don't know. They don't look too bad, but apparently they're higher than usual. So anyway, any special terrain effects here? Negates other terrain into hex. That's probably a road. Yeah. The bridge instead of the ditch. Use the irrigation ditch hex side effect for D. So if Pike is trying to move across the bridge, it can't, you know, it can't break its formation completely. I don't know, maybe the combat ratings. I mean, a -2 on the ditch is, I think, worse than the other ditch, but there's some suggestion that the Venetians dug it further. This is a timed engagement. The French only have 9. That, you know, sounds like, ooh, you know, a quarter of the timed engagement usual penalty or whatever is not against you. You know, unless you're doing something really weird, like massive army outflanks and stuff like that, I don't think it's very likely that you're going to see that timed engagement be an issue. Just if the Venetians, you know, if the French move around a lot and then the Venetians, and this gets down low, the Venetians might take some passes that they otherwise might not. But in general, it's just a little bit of pressure to push things here. The ditch itself, there's nothing too exciting about that. Flight levels, there's not a current flight level marker here. What about those French reinforcements? How do they work? On each free activation, they can either activate a battle on the map or try to enter the reinforcing battle. On a 3 or less, the reinforcing battle comes on the board. And then on a 4 or more, the activation's lost, but you can make a continuation check, and there's a fair amount of forces there. When the French reinforcements come on, they get 20 more to their flight level, bringing them up to a 45. Now, obviously, they kind of want to bring them on, but if they keep rolling and failing, that is one way that this could run out. So it kind of gives a little bit of option there. I don't know if there's anything else to really speak about here, so I don't know if I'm starting to note either. Normally I don't. Well, we got the chits, a couple of seizure opportunities. We have an unsteady troops that allows you to kind of break a unit before you attack, so disorganize it, which is kind of a cool feature. Well, it seems to me I made an error in my setup. I had to shift some guns over. All the artillery starts out unlimbered, which means my French guns aren't going to sneak up another hex. And the Venetian guns here, I had to put them someplace where they could be effective, not count on them sliding up and helping defend the entrenchment. And I guess the French go first, which gives me a free activation. Do I want to bring all these happy guys in? I would need a 3 or less to bring them in. I think so. Where do they come? 30, 21 to 35, 21. It's this little line here. They would certainly be a useful force to try to cut around the side. The danger of it, of course, is if I fail and then don't get a continuation, the Venetians can just say, yeah, pass, you know. So I don't want to do that too many times, but I think bringing them in sounds like a good choice. Or trying to. And yay, they're coming. Consideration of whether to send them on the closer flank, but I feel that if I slide some of the pikemen out here to help defend against those mounted cav, and use my crossbowmen as more of a defensive line. You know, if the Venetians want to come out and slam into me because I got weak crossbowmen there, they're going to pay some price for that. And I've got my sword and buckler and pike units here under the king who could come help defend against it. So I'm willing to do that to provide a little bit of pressure on this flank and then send this rather large formation here under Treme to try to do the real outflanking operation. We got, I think it was 2 continuations after that initial activation. The only real problem, the artillery is a little slow, but that's not really a big deal. I'll eventually get them set up where I want them and be able to pound things. Notably, though, what it means is my sort of central unit isn't really getting activated at all. And that's okay because he's not very good at getting continuations compared to everyone else. This guy's got a 5 activation rating. This guy's within range of Louis, so he gets the additional -1 bonus, which is kind of cool. And now it's over on the Venetian side. And they didn't want to trump in. Doesn't really do much to do so. And they may pass, I don't know. Let me give some thought to that. But right now, I've got to go work and stress about whether or not I'm ever going to see my stuff. I'm left with a few interesting questions with the Venetians. One is, hey, do I just want to pass and try to run out that time? Yeah, that would be great, but I'm pretty sure there's not a real answer to that. So is there anything I want to do? Well, yeah. These guys are all forced to be facing this way at the beginning of the game. I would kind of like to shift some of them so that they're ready to receive that charge. Also, maybe I want to move these guys forward, and he's got a big -2 bonus, which means he would apply that to him. Assuming he's in range, which he is. Which is great, except if I trigger these guys first, who I don't really have an obvious need for, the French could jump in and take advantage of those flanks, so I'm going to have to go with the Greys first. And by doing the movement that I did, I ended up not getting charged. The one problem is I ended up not causing one of these tokens to get fired off. There wasn't very much for the Venetians to do. I moved one unit from this formation to take up the hole. It's an enforced hole, if I recall correctly. And I couldn't do that to remove this light cavalry. So that's kind of a weak spot in my formation, but not a terrible one. And I fired my artillery from both units. And I could, if I'd gotten, a second continuation, I could have kept firing these guys' artillery. They didn't get that. So that's about the excitement left there. Continue to push things forward on both flanks. I don't count on much happening over here. I just don't have a lot of force, and you can see my crossbow got shot up by their arquebuses. That gives the Venetians a kind of nice target. And I don't know. I'm trying to think of its reason to activate him first, or hey, if the French want to use a counter to trump in at this point, sure, whatever. I'm not sure yet. First points on the board, just for a retire that unit that was up there, blast them away. I moved out of here, hopes of getting one of these arquebusiers up into place. And I'm covering with the light cav instead of the man-at-arms because, well, the light cav can fall away and then the man-at-arms is capable of charging, presumably, depending on how things fall out, but whatever. This is a weird situation, If I want to shoot back, I don't get to move the turn along. But if I just sit there, somehow, something bad happens. I don't know what to the French. And I'm not quite sure what the timed limits are supposed to mean. If they triggered no matter what, it would make sense. But the fact that they don't means all it does is forces the French to be on the offensive at some level or another. And if they get disrupted enough by fire or whatever, maybe it's worth taking a pass. Begin to slam in over here. They've gotten rid of a couple of units. So a couple of activations, firepower coming in here, moving these guys, and then finally hitting there. We took out the light cav by shooting it first, so it was disordered and couldn't withdraw. And this guy, I think he got shot out of position by artillery fire, honestly. But anyway, that's our point value. I had forgotten to move this, so now it's in place. These commands stretching out all over Hell and Creation. Not so much this one because they're all connected and they're not engaged, but this over here is outside of range of its commander. And that's a problem because, and maybe this as well, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, these guys are as well. But none of these are a terrible problem. These guys here they can't withdraw from they can't leave being adjacent to an enemy unless they're in command. And these guys can't recover from their disruption. So it's very important for me to actually activate this guy to have a chance of getting those out of the problem situation they're in. In fact, the French, if that's not completely handled, the French are going to be able to slam from behind and start crushing some of those units as well. So maybe this side doesn't even have to really act anymore. I haven't noticed the need before, but this is the first time. This is the first set that I've seen doesn't have out of command shits. Out of command is still a status. I don't think I can find any. Anyway, I'm going to use, there's plenty of other markers you can use for it. And usually you don't need it, but there I do want this because, not for that. Oh, I don't know what. I was doing the wrong side. I want to do it over there. I thought I was moving the French. Trumping action going on down here, both successful. Things just kept swinging, after the initial actions. And the French, I don't know if they really caused much damage, but they took a couple of losses. Artillery fire plus other facets hitting them. The Spaniards really probably need to activate this at some point soon because things are getting pretty thin over here. The problem is by doing that, there may be open. There's still a couple of French jets. We don't know what they are, but chances are there's a seizure in there. And we haven't used those unsteady troops for either side yet. That's a powerful little chit, but I tend to forget the ones that don't have to do with seizing opportunity. Cover from the firing over here and launch a mounted attack, which wiped out one of those SBs. We're getting a pretty good number up here in terms of casualties on the Venetians. And we've got an engaged there. This is going to throw things back in the Venetian side of play, but yeah, it looks pretty ugly for them. It really does. I'll probably hit that so that I get back those 3 points. Not that I really need those 3 points, but I need the troops from them. And it looks like the battle's mainly developing up here right now. I find with all the firepower going on in this, as opposed to the normal Men of Iron ones, it really throws a lot more fiddliness into the design than I'm used to with my Men of Iron games. I always say, geez, I wish Men of Iron was a little bit more detailed, more like the great battles of history stuff. But honestly, I've gotten kind of used to how light it is, and this one, it feels like I'm doing too much work for the units, just for what I was expecting, maybe more than anything else. I don't know that it's particularly a worse design. It's just that it's not the design I was looking forward to in my particular mental state, I guess. Opening the French up here with prolonged artillery fire, they came charging out with some of their sword and buckler units and crushed a couple of crossbows that were sitting out there. It's a 12 now. I mean, this is a long battle. And also smashed into this pike. but did not get another continuation. These guys are recovered. I forgot to flip them. Tertial malt here. Gonna push the Venetians back a little bit, driving that number back up. Taking out another of the sword and buckler units, a couple of engaged units. There's definitely some problems here, but you know. And now, what is the difficulty? Well, it's which Venetian unit to activate first, and I'm going to go for our leaders units. Use that Alviano, I guess, simply because he has a couple of things to do, and not as much artillery, but I got something I could kill, so that's kind of cool. For an action with both of the Venetian sides, a little bit of recovery going on, but also a charge breaking up the mounted unit. We've got a lot of retired French units. That doesn't get us a lot of points, but it does maybe force them to try to recover this activity. Things are looking kind of bad over here. One of the problems is when things start looking bad, it's kind of tough to get out of the way. The only thing going in the French advantage here is the fact that if I can draw the Venetian leaders, or even just one of them, away, that means other forces aren't in command and they can't really operate very well. So that's one appealing facet to the situation for the French, is that the way that the Venetians are dispersed means that they can't really keep all their forces in command, hold a defensive line if it comes under pressure, and chase these things down. They can kind of do a couple of those, but not all three at the same time. Of course, it's not clear whether this has to be activated or if I can get away with that, because I know the Venetians have a chip. I don't know what it is. It's not the one that I'm most worried about, which is a seizure. What's not clear in this particular scenario is whether an irrigation ditch counts as a ditch. I'm saying it doesn't, mainly because it has this shock charge DRM of -1. Ditches are in a statement that talks about a DRM of -2 for barriers. And again, the fact that it has the word ditch in it is the only reason that I would consider it, but I think ditch is specific to, this is in the general rules, not in the scenario rules. Ditch is specific to the items that are actually called ditch. Matter open to interpretation, but what it means is that I can actually charge over the irrigation ditch. Essentially, I have to look up this chart every time. So like, oh look, vineyards is one of the things that's denied in here. And this is not expressed on the terrain effects chart in any sort of disallows charge or anything. That would be a helpful little mnemonic device. As it stands, this is one of the real problems I have with this, this particular game in it. But maybe with a lot of them, I know in Blood and Roses I had to check a couple of times on the charge rules. Am I allowed to charge over this? It's just not a lot of support for handling that. I found myself not wanting to charge much in there because generally they were dismounted men-at-arms. Here though, they're always mounted, so the charges are more effective and more valuable. And thus, you know, hey, I can't make it through this hex. That's not a -2. The actual wording of this has to do with may not cross rivers or any water hex side that costs more than one movement or incurs a disorder roll. Trench, ditch, or rampart. And then the other side, a whole list of different terrains. Now, it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to charge through vineyards, and it does also make sense that they're not all that painful to just attack through, i.e. they have absolutely no effect, but they have a high movement point cost. It doesn't seem like it would be terrain you could charge through, but I could see where horses moving more slowly could engage without any difficulty through it. But regardless of that, you know, the point is that the charge rules and a few other rules in this game require that I'm constantly looking stuff up. One of the other ones that's a big pain in the ass is these chits. I really am kind of not terribly excited about their overall effect in the game. There's a lot of randomness in this game anyway. Do you really need those? Well, maybe to add some excitement to opposed play with holding a chit, kind of like battle cards and crap like that. I'm not sure I'm all that in favor of them opposed either, but I can see where some people want that kind of play. And the attempt to launch an attack on this flank kind of petered out. Yeah, I pushed some of these guys back, but I got shoved back too. I'm getting some cannons on the line though. Those might be able to do something of value while I continue trying to outflank with all my sword and buckler guys and just try to collapse that. We'll see. Venetian firepower, especially on the sword and buckler units, concentrating up here. Number of activities, they got 3 continuations. Allowed them to make a lot of ground, and you can see they pushed the French up to 29, getting very, very close to where the points are, and the French have problems. They've got their banner surrounded, which means they might need to move their banner or get some activations, because otherwise they'll start losing units due to overcrowding there. And they had problems with overcrowding here where they couldn't get retreats and stuff, which hit them pretty hard too. It's beginning to look like it might actually be able to eke out a Venetian victory here. Good chance doing the flag rally. It got them a few points back, but then they failed the continuation. And they had like a 60% chance of succeeding. Sometimes I like to take risks that maybe are a little too high. That puts them in a dangerous position because now anything that's retired will just be destroyed because there's no spaces next to that banner. The French are starting to pay a little bit of a price for that choice. One unit, I believe, got retired, which is kind of weird because a lot of artillery fire up here and everything could have all retired things. And melee over here destroyed a pike unit. That's a big point of, number of points, but that was a pure straight out destroy. We've been getting continuations. We're back over to the gray guys here. In a lot of ways, the Venetians don't really have to do much. They can just rely on their artillery fire, move their units back to get into position, and more or less say, you know what, eventually you will fail those die rolls, and we are not in any risk. So you have to come charging at us. Your army's, in a weakened state, and we could just kind of push it over the edge. Artillery fire was incredibly effective, picking off all of the big 5-point units that were on the line. We've pushed the French over, and the French have lost Agnadello. This was kind of an interesting battle just because it's a little bigger than the others, but and obviously, I didn't do well with the French, but I felt a little like I was playing too much of a waiting game on both sides to really be terribly enjoyable, but that is the game the Venetians want to do. On the other hand, charging forward, smashing into sword and buckler with mixed forces, that didn't seem terribly wise. Running into those guns didn't seem terribly wise. I actually thought I had the advantages once this started doing well. Sending this over instead of relying over on the left flank, I think that was probably my biggest weakness. But they looked like they were doing good things, right? And putting pressure on a flank and making the Venetians have a lot of trouble. But even though the French had more chits for seizures, they didn't, and they had good enough leadership, they didn't really manage to get a balanced attacking situation. These guys had so far to walk from coming on the board. Maybe if I had sent them up
to help over there, that would have been good. I also think there was probably a little bit of luck in there, maybe some other issues, but it's certainly not as unbalanced a scenario, at least with my play of the French, as my first impression was. Now, the French could have avoided a lot of this by moving some of these units out of the way, or at least some of this, by moving some of these units out of the way. But I don't know if they could have avoided enough to get themselves free of this, given the number of continuations that the Venetians got. The Venetians were getting, towards the end of the game, better continuation rolls than the French. Now, they're a little better in terms of leadership, I guess. We have a 4 and a 6. Here we have a 4, a 5, and a 4. And by the end of the game, or by the important part of the game, nobody was able to use Louis' command bonus. He should have really run over to help with these guys, because at least that way I would have 2 5s, and that would give me pretty much a balance to that 4-6 combination. Agnadello, let's send this up.